The quiet rise of an unexpected icon. Some restaurants are born to be famous. Others stumble into greatness almost by accident. But once in a lifetime, a small, unassuming place rises quietly, without marketing, without prestige, without a famous chef, and becomes a cultural icon no one saw coming. This is a story of how one humble dining room transformed from a forgotten spot on the edge of a city into a destination that shaped the identity of an entire generation. It began with nothing remarkable. A faded sign, a narrow doorway, a dining room that barely fit 10 tables. For years, the restaurant existed in the background, a place locals passed without a second glance. Its owner, a gentle man with weary eyes, opened each morning with no expectation beyond surviving the day. He had no desire for fame, no master plan, just a belief that food prepared with honesty deserved a place in the world, even if the world never noticed. But the city around him was changing. People were becoming restless, tired of extravagance, exhausted by rising costs, longing for something real. Fine dining establishments battled for attention with louder presentations, grander concepts, and ever-rising prices. Meals became performances instead of comforts. Diners were dazzled, yet strangely unsatisfied. And in that growing emptiness, the small, quiet restaurant began to glow like a soft, steady ember. To understand how it rose to prominence, we must return to the person who unknowingly set everything in motion. A young server searching for purpose. She joined the restaurant not out of passion, but out of necessity. Yet over time, she discovered something extraordinary within its walls. A sense of warmth she had never known in larger establishments. Guests weren't customers. They were neighbors. Dishes weren't inventions. They were memories shared across tables. One evening, moved by the simplicity of a dish that tasted like childhood, she posted a heartfelt message online. Not a review, not a marketing pitch. Just a reflection about the comfort she felt while serving food made with such quiet sincerity. Her words traveled further than she imagined. People began to visit, not in crowds, but in gentle waves. Diners who sought refuge from the noise. Writers searching for authenticity. Young couples craving a place untouched by pretense. And though the restaurant remained modest, something unmistakable was beginning to stir beneath its surface. A momentum shaped not by ambition, but by connection. And slowly, quietly, the rise of an unexpected icon began. At first, the increasing attention felt like a warm surprise. Regulars welcomed the new faces, proud that others were discovering the hidden comfort they had cherished for years. The owner greeted each guest with the same gentle smile, unaware that his small routines, refilling tea without being asked, remembering names after a single visit, were becoming part of the restaurant's quiet legend. Everything remained simple, unpolished, and deeply human. But as the waves of visitors grew stronger, subtle tensions began to form beneath the surface. The kitchen, once calm and slow-paced, now struggled to keep up. The owner worked longer hours, pushing through fatigue rather than admitting he needed help. The young server who unintentionally sparked the restaurant's rise felt torn between joy and guilt. She hadn't meant to change the rhythm of a place that had comforted so many. And the guests who discovered the restaurant through her post arrived with expectations. Expectations the modest dining room was never designed to meet. Still, night after night, something magical happened. People left the restaurant lighter than they arrived. They spoke about the food, not as cuisine, but as feeling. They described the experience as a return to something they didn't realize they had lost, an atmosphere of sincerity rare in a city racing toward modernity. The media took notice. Articles appeared, praising the restaurant's humility. Food critics, intrigued by the growing whispers, visited quietly and wrote essays filled with gentle admiration. They celebrated its authenticity, calling it a refuge in an age obsessed with spectacle. But with every article, the line outside grew longer. Reservations became impossible to secure. Influencers arrived in droves, cameras ready to capture what they hoped would be the next big discovery. And suddenly, the restaurant was no longer a quiet secret. It was a sensation. The influx of attention brought complications the owner never anticipated. Crowds overwhelmed the staff. Longtime regulars, who once found comfort in its peaceful atmosphere, now found themselves squeezed between tourists snapping photos. The dishes, once prepared at an unhurried pace, were forced into a rhythm the kitchen wasn't built to sustain, and the owner, though grateful, felt the pressure building in ways he didn't know how to express. Yet beneath all this, something deeper was unfolding. A cultural shift began radiating outward from the restaurant's walls. People started seeking simplicity in their own lives, choosing warmth over spectacle, meaning over noise. Small eateries across the city revived forgotten recipes. Community tables returned to popularity. Conversations about the value of authenticity became louder, reshaping the way the city understood food and connection. The restaurant had unknowingly become a symbol, but symbols carry weight. And as expectations soared beyond anything the owner had imagined, he felt the delicate balance beginning to wobble. His restaurant was rising higher and faster than he could control, and the question loomed like a shadow over the dining room. Could something born from humility survive the spotlight now fixed upon it? The pressure mounted with each passing week. What began as a gentle wave of attention had become a relentless tide, sweeping the small restaurant into a world it was never meant to navigate. The dining room, once a haven of stillness, now pulsed with noise and urgency. Guests arrived with lists of expectations curated from articles and influencer posts. They wanted to experience the magic they had read about. But magic, the owner knew, could never be summoned on demand. The kitchen strained under the weight of popularity. The owner moved with growing exhaustion, his hands shaking subtly as he prepared dishes that once brought him quiet joy. The young server tried to protect him from overwhelming crowds, but even she could feel the atmosphere shifting, warmer in some ways, but brittle in others. The staff worked longer hours than ever before, and the sense of family that had once defined the restaurant began to fray at the edges. Critics who had once praised the place returned with sharper eyes. They questioned whether the restaurant could sustain its charm under pressure. Some even hinted that the rise had been unearned, that nostalgia had clouded judgment, that simplicity had been mistaken for genius. The owner felt these criticisms more deeply than he admitted. He had never sought acclaim, yet now found himself judged against standards he had never intended to meet. And then came the moment that marked the beginning of a deeper conflict. A major magazine announced it would feature the restaurant in a special issue dedicated to cultural icons. The editorial team requested an interview with the owner, insisting that his story was inspiring, meaningful, essential. But when they sent the article draft for approval, the owner was startled. They had rewritten his life into a narrative of heroic ambition, of a visionary chef striving to ascend the culinary world. Every quiet truth had been replaced with dramatic fiction. He refused to sign off on it. The writers pushed back. They argued that audiences want a story of triumph, not humility. They insisted the truth wasn't compelling enough. The young server watched as the owner tried repeatedly to explain his perspective, his voice shaking not with anger, but with fear that he was losing control of the very identity that had made the restaurant special. But the magazine didn't want nuance. They wanted mythology. The conflict spilled into the public eye. Commentators debated whether the owner was being ungrateful, difficult, or naive. Influencers speculated about internal turmoil. Regulars felt torn, unsure how to support a place that was suddenly at the center of a cultural storm. Amid the chaos, the owner made a rare decision. He closed the restaurant for one night. No announcements, no explanations, just a handwritten sign on the door that read "Resting." Inside, the staff gathered around the empty tables, listening as the owner spoke softly about why he had opened the restaurant in the first place. He never wanted fame. He wanted connection. He wanted to offer comfort in a world that rushed too quickly to notice the quiet, meaningful things. As he spoke, the weight on their shoulders lifted enough for them to breathe again, but the uncertainty remained. The city now held expectations the restaurant never asked for. The world was watching, and the next choice they made would determine whether the restaurant would remain a symbol of authenticity or collapse under the pressure of its unexpected rise. The emotional peak was drawing near. What happened next would test not just a restaurant's identity, but its very reason for existing. The morning after the unexpected closure, the city buzzed with speculation. Some assumed the restaurant was preparing a grand announcement. Others feared it had finally succumbed to the pressure of its newfound fame. But inside its small, quiet dining room, the staff gathered with a sense of unity they had not felt in months. The owner stood before them, not as a reluctant icon, but as a gentle man who had once opened these doors with nothing but hope. He spoke softly, explaining that the restaurant could not continue as it had. The expectations were too heavy, the crowds too overwhelming, the spotlight far too bright for a place built on stillness. But he also made something clear. He did not want to abandon the people who found comfort here. He wanted to protect the soul of the restaurant, even if it meant disappointing those who sought spectacle instead of sincerity. And so, he made a bold decision. The restaurant would remain open, but on its own terms. Reduced hours, limited reservations, a smaller menu crafted with intention rather than demand. Guests would be encouraged to put away cameras, to savor the moment, to reconnect with the quiet joy that had defined the restaurant long before anyone called it iconic. It was a return not to obscurity, but to authenticity. When the restaurant reopened with its new philosophy, something unexpected happened. Instead of leaving, the crowds respected the choice. Many felt relief, an invitation to slow down, to experience the meal rather than capture it. The young server greeted guests with renewed warmth. The kitchen moved with calm precision. The owner, though tired, finally exhaled. And then came the cultural ripple the restaurant never anticipated. Writers praised the decision as courageous, calling it rebellion against a world driven by relentless momentum. Other small restaurants followed suit, scaling back hours, simplifying menus, reclaiming the intimacy they had lost. Diners began seeking meaning over spectacle, connection over novelty. The city's food culture shifted, subtly but unmistakably, towards something gentler and more human. Months later, the major magazine that had once demanded a fabricated narrative returned with different intention. This time, they asked to publish the owner's real story. Quiet, humble, unembellished. And they promised not to change a single word. When the article went live, it resonated deeply with readers, revealing a truth the industry had forgotten. Authenticity does not need a shout to be heard. The restaurant never became luxurious or flashy or grand. It didn't expand or evolve into a global brand. Instead, it became something far more powerful, a symbol of resilience in a world too busy to notice what truly matters. A reminder that greatness can rise quietly, sustained not by hype, but by heart. And as the owner locked up one evening, the street bathed in a warm glow, he understood that success isn't measured by scale or fame. It's measured by the people who walk away feeling lighter, seen, and somehow more themselves. Icons don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.